But Gon and Killua are unique cases where they get massive strength gains in a very short time from just fighting. Hey, what's up everybody? It's LeeLos, and today we're talking about why Rage Amp Gon is overpowered. Stay steady in pursuit of your dreams and goals. You're born to win, you're made for greatness, and I definitely believe in you guys. Keep up the great work each and every day. So let's get started with talking about Gon Freakses. So in the story of Hunter x Hunter, emotions in general have an effect on Nen. This is shown to us by Kurapika's Nen Master, in which Kurapika's Nen Master lists off a bunch of different emotions and then says all of the emotions you're capable of factor into Nen. It might enable something beyond 100%, so you could make the argument that in theory all Nen users have the ability to get a Rage Amp of some kind. However, Gon is a unique case in which he was getting Rage Amps even before he learned how to use Nen. For example, at the very beginning of the series, when he gets angry at Illumi, he breaks Illumi's arm. Now, this scene is genuinely crazy because this should be way beyond his normal limitations. If you highball this scene and make the argument that Illumi was using 10 and no Nen Gon was still able to break his arm, you can get some really crazy scaling for Gon, but I definitely view that as more of a highball interpretation. A more medium ball interpretation is that Illumi was just chilling there and not using 10 or any defensive Nen application of any kind. That is the much more likely interpretation of this scene. That being said, this is still a crazy feat because Gon has actually zero official training of any kind. All he's done up until this point in his life is just run around in the woods, and by getting angry, he's breaking the arm of Killua's older brother, someone who's even stronger than Killua is. Then his Rage Amps become even crazier than this. In complete honesty, Gon has some similarities with the character Gohan from Dragon Ball Z. They're both genius characters that when they get angry, their power skyrockets beyond what they're normally capable of, with a key difference being that Gon actually enjoys training and fighting, and he goes out of his way to become more powerful. Now, Gon's Rage Amps at the end of the Chimera Ant arc were so insane that in many cases, people just consider him to be a different character altogether. For example, when people are power scaling Gon and you ask a question like, would Gon be able to defeat Machi, for example? People typically say things like, well, do you mean normal Gon or enraged Gon? When Kurapika's Nen Master is listing off different emotions that can factor into Nen, one of the emotions that he lists is determination. Determination being something that can make your Nen stronger than 100%. This has a lot of relevance to Rage Gon because it actually might help explain why he was so powerful at the end of the Chimera Ant arc. Poof states that out of all of their enemies, Gon likely has the strongest determination. This implies that there's a real possibility that Gon was actually getting 3 different power-ups. One, Gon gets a Rage Amp to his overall strength, even when he's not using Nen, and we don't really get an explanation as to why. The second would be the Rage Amp that he gets to his Nen in general, and the third would be a Determination Amp, and implied by Poof, he would get the strongest Determination Amp out of any of the Palace Hunters. It should also be noted that even without these amps, Gon was already very powerful by the time of the palace invasion. His overall training with Bisky that he does for 1 month during the Chimera Ant arc is very underrated in general. Gon and Killua made over a year's worth of progress very early on in this portion of training and then went considerably beyond that. And by the end of the training, Gon was actually able to hold his own with Knuckle while Knuckle was fighting at his full strength and actually wins some punch exchanges against Knuckle, which is a crazy feat to perform because Knuckle is stated to be on par with Kite in physical strength. Something else that's underrated is just how much power Gon and Killua have been shown to gain in very short time periods. Gon, on his second to last day of training, in one fight, went from getting speed blitzed by Knuckle's warm-up punches at the start of the fight to holding his own with Knuckle by the end of the fight, and they had only been fighting for 20 minutes. There's actually a line of dialogue that states he was getting used to Knuckles' speed, which is a crazy thing to do in just 20 minutes of fighting somebody who was able to speed blitz him just a few minutes prior. Then we see the next day he's actually winning punch exchanges against a full power Knuckle. That's a crazy feat. That is a significant improvement in his overall abilities. And that's just the difference between 1 or 2 fights for Gon, or maybe just 1 day's difference. It's stated numerous times that it's important for hunters to get more fighting experience. It makes them overall much more powerful. But Gon and Killua are unique cases cases where they get massive strength gains in a very short time from just fighting. The reason this is important is because there's a strong argument that during the time frame of right after they finish their second round of training with Bisky and Gon's put into Zetsu, all the way up until right when the palace invasion begins, there's a good argument that Gon actually got stronger during that time frame, even without including the rage amps. For example, we actually see that Gon and Killua are training without using Nen, and Gon during this time frame also tells Palm that he has to continue training in order to get ready to fight Pito. He understands that he's not on the level of Pito just yet, so he needs to keep training and get stronger so that he can face these threats that defeated Kite. So there's a real possibility that during this entire month, Gon just continued training without using Nen, just making his overall physical stats more powerful. It's also implied when Gon sees Kite again, where Knuckles says that Gon's not on a level where he'll be able to react to this version of Kite, but Gon just does it anyway. Knuckle, being a guy who at his full strength fought against Gon while Gon was using his full strength, he should have a good understanding of how powerful Gon is, but Gon is outperforming his expectations. So this implies that Gon's physical abilities have improved since the last time him and Knuckle battled. You could even make the argument that maybe Gon and Killua went back to Bisky, and Bisky continued training them without Gon using Nen in some way, shape, or form. But this is more of a highball interpretation. We don't know everything that happened during this 1 month of time where Gon could not use Nen, but let me know what you guys think about this idea in the comments. Bisky does say, after all, she didn't complete all of the training that she had planned for Gon and Killua when they went to fight Knuckle and Shoot for the final time, so maybe during the 1 month where Gon couldn't use Nen, she just picked up where she left off and continued helping them train. There's a possibility of this, but let me know what you guys think overall, because maybe they just continued training on their own. Furthermore, when Gon fights the Owl in Bath, fighting 2 officer ants that were amped by Nen and was still just destroying these characters, his paper ability and his rock ability seem to have evolved to a different level. Both of them seem to be stronger than they were when he fought against Knuckle, which would further imply that Gon continued training. Now, all that being said, Rage Gon can be scaled a few different ways. One of the scenes involving Rage Gon that isn't spoken about quite as much is a scene where Poof was about to sneak attack Gon, and Pito stops Poof. Pito says that Gon might have attacked Komugi before Poof's attack would land on Gon. This is some interesting scaling because there's a few different interpretations of this scene. You could make the argument that maybe Pito's just being overly careful and Poof would have actually blitzed Gon before he could get up and attack Komugi. But if you're highballing this scene, you could make the argument that enraged Gon is somewhat relative in reaction speed to this version of Poof. Also, the fact that he was able to notice Poof at all was crazy anyway. We also see Gon and Killua were able to dodge an attack from Yuppie at point blank range, so it definitely makes you wonder, was this angry version of Gon somewhat relative to Poof in reaction speed? I lean towards thinking that's more of a highball interpretation. Gon did have a shorter distance to travel to attack Komugi than Poof would have to travel to attack Gon anyway, and Pito was being very careful, so I think it's an interesting thing to debate. But the more notable statements for angry Gon are, one, Killua saying that his aura is nothing like it's ever been before. This is the same Killua who saw Gon get angry and nearly one-shot Morel, so a highball interpretation of this statement is that Gon, just standing there, was already stronger than he was when he was about to one-shot kill Morel. He then goes on to amp his power numerous times after this, reaching even greater levels of strength. Then he stacks rock on top of all of that and becomes 10 to dozens of times more powerful than this. He is insane. You could honestly make an argument that he's strong enough to one-shot some of the stronger characters in Hunter x Hunter even without using rock. If you take this highball interpretation of this statement 100% literally, you can make arguments for him being strong enough to one-shot characters even like Knuckle or Shoot even without using rock. Then he stacks rock on top of that and becomes even stronger. The possibilities for highball interpretations of this version of Angry Kid Gon are really crazy. There's a very good argument for Angry Kid Gon being the physically strongest hunter amongst the palace hunters during the palace invasion, even without using rock, meaning he was physically stronger than Morel, Knuckle, Shoot, or Killua at this point. It should also be noted that Killua was stated to be physically weaker than Palm, so it's very likely that he was physically stronger than at least base form Killua during this portion of the arc, and then with rock he just becomes magnitude stronger than that. So overall, Angry Kid Gon is just genuinely a monster. Even before he goes into his adult Gon transformation, his ability to use rock while while running is massively underrated, because essentially, unless his enemy has a long-range attack of some kind, or they're able to speed blitz Gon, if they can't fulfill one or two of those conditions, then essentially the moment Gon starts charging running rock, he just wins the fight. Like really, there's not much else you can do, you know? Like, it's kind of just a broken ability. That's with a normal Gon. Imagine an angry kid Gon charging a running rock. Like, really think about who are the characters in the series that can actually handle that, because Gon, who's already this powerful, who's already performing crazy feats, is amping his strength to even higher levels. If he starts then charging rock and running at somebody, who is really able to defeat that? Who are the characters that can still speed blitz someone like this, or have long range attacks fast enough and effective enough to handle somebody like this? It's an interesting thing to think about. He really is very broken, especially when you consider how powerful his focus is in general. He was able to lock in on Yuppie faster than Killua did after they were all surprised by the Dragon Dive ability. That in general is a very underrated scene, because Gon didn't even know what the Dragon Dive ability was. He had never seen Yuppie before. For all he knew, it was an attack from one of the Royal Guard, but he still just locked in on Yuppie and was able to analyze many different elements at once, even faster than Killua did in this very situation. There's a lot of things about enraged Gon that make him really powerful. His insane focus, his insane aura output in general, and there's a good argument that his overall physical abilities, even without Nen, had been increased due to his continued training. Overall, he's just a super powerful character. And finally, we can mention this statement here where Killua says, even someone like Pito wouldn't stand a chance against this version of Gon if Pito doesn't use Nen. This is a very crazy scene, because no Nen Pito is still a monstrous character. We actually see Pito's capable of altering the muscles in its legs and catapulting itself at crazy speeds. So in theory, even with an ability like this, Angry Kid Gon is just going to react to Pito and is more likely to win a fight if that version of Pito's not using Nen. He's a monstrous character. He's super strong. And something else to consider is Gon, he reached this level of power in like a year of training. There's a scene in the arc following the Chimera Ant arc in which it states that Gon is still 12 years old. In the manga, it says Gon at the very beginning of the manga is actually 11. He's 11 but close to 12. In theory, the entire story's runtime from chapter 1 up until the end of the Chimera Ant arc, where Gon's performing all of these crazy feats, it was like slightly more than a year. And then after the Chimera Ant arc, Gon's almost 13, and he wasn't even training during that entire time frame. Like, for example, York New City wasn't really a training arc for Gon and Killua, and there was 1 month of time where he had his arm broken and he wasn't training. So really, all of this stuff that Gon's performing, he did this in like less than a year of instruction. That's insane. He is a broken character. He's one of the only characters in the series that are stated to have a bottomless potential, and it makes you wonder how strong would Gon have been if Jing had actually just raised him and trained him by himself. But yeah, that's about everything I wanted to say. Thank you guys for watching. I appreciate the views, I appreciate the comments, like and subscribe, and I'll see ya on the next one.